Welcome to our agenda forum. Agenda forums are specifically for agenda items which are to be considered by Council at the next ordinary meeting of Council. Agenda forums are not a decision-making forum. They provide an opportunity for councillors to be equally informed and seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of such matters to the next ordinary meeting of Council for formal consideration and decision. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the Council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in the meeting during public question time and deputation time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to the Council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Attendances and apologies, Mr CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Predovnik and also Councillor Jones for this evening. Okay,
Councillor Predovnik is unable to make it for work commitments. She is watching online. Councillor McCulloch is on MS Teams. She is unwell. Any other apologies?
Yeah, Councillor Scanlon also offers her apologies.
And Councillor Scanlon also an apology. Declaration of financial proximity interests and interests affecting impartiality, Mr CEO.
Mr Mayor, we have two for this evening. The first one from Councillor Kiley. It's in relation to item 4.5, which is the proposed signage, 43 James Street, Guildford. The interest is one of impartiality, and the reason is, as an executive of the Guildford Association, I may have contributed to submissions on this item. The other declaration of interest that we have is from Councillor Parry. It's in relation to item C1.1. Under Councillor Bailey, the Ladies Only Day at the City of Swan Leisure Centres. It's an interest of impartiality, and the reason is that Councillor Parry is a member of the Swan Leisure Centres.
Any other declarations? Councillor Richardson. That is item 1310, isn't it? Okay, and there was another hand somewhere. Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thanks. I'm a member of the Midland Society who actually put the petition together for the houses.
Okay, so that would be 3.2.
3.2, yes.
Okay.
So I'll do a form for that.
Thank you. Any others from councillors or staff? None. Public question time. Questions related to reports contained on the agenda. I have none for which due notice has been given. Any questions relating to items on the agenda for which due notice has not been given? Be none. Reports and motions of which previous notice has been given. Deputations. In accordance with the procedures of public participation at agenda forums, all requests for an in-person deputations and submissions in written deputations were required by 3 p.m. Tuesday 20th of July. All written deputations received by 4:30 Tuesday the 20th of July are circulated, with the preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. We have written deputations on item 3.2, councillors, which is the draft desktop heritage assessment from the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association. Also another one from the same organisation on 4.1, the proposed amendment of number 203 Local Planning Scheme 17 to rezone the lots bounded by Roe Highway, the Freight Line, Bellevue Road and James Street, Bellevue, from general industrial to light industrial. Our first in-person deputations come up in 4.10, which is the proposed amendments to the Dayton District Structure Plan, ODP 159/D, the Dayton Structure Plan 2A, Dayton Commercial Centre Structure Plan 3. The first speaker on this is Mr Josh Carmody from Planning Solutions against the officer's recommendations. And because of the complexity, Mr Carmody has asked for 7 minutes, and I've granted him that. So, Mr Carmody, if you could just come there, turn the microphone on and...
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Josh Carmody from Planning Solutions, and I'm acting on behalf of Prime West. Prime West is the owner of the Caversham Village Shopping Centre. Now, we strongly object to the City's recommendation that Council support the proposed amendments to the Dayton Structure Plans. The proposed amendments undermine the activity centre hierarchy. They're contrary to state government policy, and they'll deliver a form of development that's been resisted by the planning framework for decades now. And we request that Council recommend that these amendments be refused outright. The current planning framework has been working well. It's provided a high level of certainty for investment in the North East Corridor. It's delivered high-quality development outcomes in Caversham and the South Brabham district centre, and it's worked exactly as intended. The proponent is essentially seeking to delete the Dayton Neighbourhood Centre at Arthur Street and replace it with what is, to all intents and purposes, likely to become a future district centre at Dayton Central. Now, I can't fault the proponent for trying to maximise the returns on their investment, and in fact I admire the honesty of the application that you have before you. They make no secret of the fact that this is, in fact, a large car-based activity centre designed around maximising exposure and access from John Pellier Drive. And that's good for them, but it's not good planning, it's not good for the community, and it shouldn't be supported for the following reasons, which I'm going to go through. So we object firstly to the applicant's claim that these changes are necessary because Arthur Street has not and will not be developed as a neighbourhood centre. We believe this is unsubstantiated and it hasn't been assessed or evaluated by the city in their own reporting. And it shouldn't be taken on face value. Now, the Arthur Street site has similar attributes to the Caversham Village shopping centre site in terms of its size and its location, and it's capable of accommodating a full-line supermarket. Perhaps not a supermarket of the size and the scale which the applicant's seeking, but a full-line supermarket nonetheless. Our second objection: Dayton Central will not deliver the community and planning outcomes that we expect from neighbourhood centres. Quite simply, I've just lost my spot. The applicant and to some extent the city have presented the amendment as a simple swap of the local and neighbourhood centre locations. But in reality, this is sleight of hand and it doesn't bear up to scrutiny. Under the state's activity centre policies, activity centres are classified and assessed based on their function, their land use characteristics and accessibility, not just the amount of retail floor space. So Dayton Central needs to be assessed against these state policies and also the operational policy of livable neighbourhoods, and it needs to be assessed in its full context. And when we look at it in its full context, it just doesn't stack up. Neighbourhood centres are required to be centrally located in walkable catchments, and Dayton Central, despite the name, is not centrally located, and it doesn't have a walkable residential catchment apart from the lower southeast corner of the catchment. Neighbourhood centres are expected to play an important role in providing walkable access to services and facilities for communities. The city's report acknowledges this. It says that Dayton Central has reduced pedestrian accessibility relative to Arthur Street. It will not provide walkable access to services and facilities to the same extent. And approval of this proposal will force the residents of Dayton to get in their car, to drive to the shop, even if all they want is a loaf of bread or a carton of milk. The residents of Dayton were meant to get a local shop at the centre of their neighbourhood, and that's being taken away. Now, showrooms and bulky goods, as the policy framework says, are unsuitable for the walkable catchment at the core of activity centres, and yet the proposed neighbourhood centre for Dayton Central that you're looking at will be surrounded by these land uses. The policies also state that neighbourhood centres are important community focal points, and it needs to be noted that Council has already delivered a Dayton community centre and public open space at Arthur Street. These public amenities will now be left as a half-finished destination that poorly serves their community. Dayton Central was never planned as a neighbourhood centre, and it doesn't contain these facilities. It will not become a community focal point. And finally, neighbourhood centres are required to be delivered in a main street format to achieve a sense of place. The applicant's seeking to remove this requirement from the structure plan. And our view is Dayton Central will not deliver the kind of attractive built form that we now expect from our neighbourhood centres, and removing the main street requirement from the structure will result in a 1980s style big box retail development in an ocean of car parking, as you can see from the renders. So Dayton Central cannot support the outcomes that we expect of a neighbourhood centre, and the proposed amendments shouldn't be supported on this ground. We have another objection, which is the retail floor caps. The way that the retail floor caps are being implemented under the proposed structure plan amendments is flawed. A 1,500 square metre floor space cap currently applies to the site, and it's very difficult for the proponents to vary this cap, and that's the reason why they have applied for this amendment. But within the amendment itself are some changes which will weaken any future floor space cap which the city is proposing, and it will make it very difficult for the JDAP to control retail floor space in the future, and we've seen this in a number of recent JDAP decisions. If the council wants any retail cap to be enforced, then the structure plan needs to be tightened up to tie the hands of the JDAP and to limit the exercise of discretion. In other words, as currently proposed in the amendments you have before you, additional retail floor space over and above the 5,000 square metres the City is recommending could be granted in future without amending the structure plan. And I'll be providing the Council with additional information following this forum in related to the technical matters of that. Our final objection. In light of the above, we believe that there is a very real risk that Dayton Central will develop into something like a district centre. Quite simply, you can't take a 5,000 square metre neighbourhood centre, place it inside a commercial zone planned for another 8,000 square metres of other retail and commercial floor space, massive amounts of car parking, isolated from a residential catchment, and still call it a neighbourhood centre. In fact, the applicant's own report treats it as a single activity node, and even the retail sustainability analysis provided by the applicant shows a catchment of up to 40,000 people, far in excess of the 15,000 people that make up the catchment of a typical neighbourhood centre. This kind of oversized commercial development is not, to quote the reports of the applicant, a best practice contemporary development concept. It's a return to the old box and a car park style retail developments of the 1980s and the early 1990s, and it's explicitly discouraged by livable neighbourhoods, which states in a provision not referenced in the City's report that large, single supermarket scale neighbourhood centres, generally over 6,000 metres square, should not be provided unless it can be demonstrated that these centres will not adversely affect the provision and location of successful larger town centres or constrain the distribution of neighbourhood centres in walking distance of most residents. Now, in our view, the applicant hasn't demonstrated this. To the contrary, what they've proven is that it is exactly these kinds of outsized neighbourhood centres that do cannibalise surrounding activity centres and do disrupt the hierarchy. And that's what we're going to see here. We'll see here that Dayton loses their walkable neighbourhood centre at Arthur Street, and we have serious questions, and serious questions are raised about the development of the district centre at Brabham South.
Thank you, Mr. Carmody. That
No worries.
7
Thank
minutes and a little bit extra, so you might want to stick around. I think there's some questions.
Sorry, yes, valuable for questions.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Carmody. Thank you for the presentation. You may recall a development application before the JDAP on Morrison Road, whereby the argument about impact on surrounding existing facilities would have been significant. It's the same argument here, yet that was effectively dealt with at SAT, and that one's going to proceed. So I wonder if there's an opportunity there. I don't see one in terms of your argument. That's what if they've got some comment on that.
If you're referencing the argument of competitive impacts upon our client's shopping centre, we haven't made, for the reasons you've outlined, we haven't made an argument here in relation to competitive impacts. That doesn't mean we don't believe that there are any, but what we're saying is there are a lot of legitimate other planning reasons to make an argument against this, and that's what we've done. So, leaving aside that issue of the competitive impacts, the state planning framework itself clearly outlines that the development proposed by the applicant is undesirable, it discourages it, and it creates quite a high bar for such developments to be approved. And a previous example was the South Brabham District Centre was previously council has approved an expansion of the retail floor space there, and it was under various different requirements in terms of built form outcome that they had to deliver for them to receive that.
Councillor Johnson.
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Carmody, can you explain your interest in this, or the interest of your client, and how this is going to impact on you or your client?
The interest of the client is maintaining a certainty in the planning framework. So they've invested in their shopping centre with the understanding that there will be a local supermarket in Dayton Central. There will be a neighbourhood centre at Arthur Street, local centre at in the Dayton Central, and this creates a high level of uncertainty. So it's the impacts on their centre from the development itself as I said, we haven't specifically addressed, but the uncertainty in the framework about what will be built here creates uncertainty for them. And in particular, the retail floor caps that I mentioned creates that uncertainty, the way that it's being implemented.
So where is your client's shopping centre or district centre?
Centre of Caversham.
The centre of Caversham, okay.
Councillor Kello.
Oh, thank you. If the shopping centre site on Arthur Street is retained and that a shopping centre is developed there, I mean that has surely more significant impact on the Caversham shopping centre in terms of competition and those kind of things than if the shopping centre is actually for Dayton is developed at this alternative site closer to Drumpelia.
Yeah, so what we've outlined is what you've got planned for Arthur Street is a neighbourhood centre. That's consistent with livable neighbourhoods. It's consistent with the planning framework in terms of the size of the lot, the amount of retail that's being delivered. What we're saying here is that by moving it into Dayton Central, the function of that development changes, and it's likely to become a far more significant development than it is at Arthur Street. So our client's got no objection to two supermarkets in the Dayton area, or the Arthur Street supermarket, full line or not. But the issue is that by moving it to Dayton Central, it creates what in effect appears to be something much bigger than a neighbourhood centre when we consider it in the context of the surrounding retail and showrooms and bulky retail which will exist alongside it.
Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Thanks for the presentation. Would you concede that the site at Arthur Street was just not viable, and it's been sitting there as an absolute mess and an eyesore for many, many years, and that in respect of a commercial centre, it just wasn't viable, and it was proven in the market to be that?
No, we wouldn't concede that. So
okay, well, just on the point about livable neighbourhoods, Dayton itself is a fairly narrow suburb abutting the Swan Valley. I would suggest that the new location is within a 800-metre walking distance for most of the new residential development within Dayton. Your thoughts on that at all?
So the new location is cut off to the west and the north from any catchment whatsoever. In fact, if you look at a 400-metre, we do a 400-metre catchment for a development like this. It doesn't contain a lot of residential population. So, I mean, the Arthur Street site is located at the centre of the suburb. It captures almost the entire residential population within that catchment. That doesn't exist here for Dayton Central. And you'll also have the physical barriers of the car parking, the road layouts, the general rural zoning to the north. The applicant has said that this is a car-based development, so I don't think they're making any secret about what it is.
And just in respect of the impact on the Caversham shopping centre, from my rough calculation, the Dayton Central is actually moving possibly 2 kilometres away if you travel along Arthur Street and Dayton Boulevard, Isidon Road. It's travelling. They're actually moving further away from the Caversham shopping centre.
No, that's not the case. Well, maybe. Yeah, no.
Depending on which way you travel, of course, but effectively they are moving further north.
Slightly further north, but clearly more accessible from Drumpelia Drive.
And just on the livable neighbourhoods, you mentioned that the officers didn't include in their report. You're saying that the impact that it would potentially have on other shopping precincts or existing shopping centres, and from that I gather you mean the Caversham shopping centre?
Sorry, could you
the issue you raised about livable neighbourhoods and its impact on already zoned or already developed shopping centres.
Oh, yes, right. Sorry. So livable neighbourhoods contains a provision that states that large neighbourhood centres, which is what we would consider this to be, beyond what livable neighbourhood says is the ideal, present a problem in terms of potentially affecting the larger activity centres around them, so causing them perhaps to develop slower for the second stage of Brabham South to not develop along the timeline that's currently expected, and yeah, that kind of thing.
So your concern is with Brabham South and Caversham, or those two? I'm just interested to know which ones you're concerned about.
So we're presenting a planning argument here. So yes, we are speaking on behalf of the client, but we're also presenting a general planning argument. And what we're articulating is that the state planning policy says that this is a development which is generally not encouraged unless there's a strong justification for it. And we don't consider this rises to the level that would justify a development of this scale and this size. So what we're sort of drawing to your attention is that this is not an argument simply made by our client who owns a shopping centre, but we are articulating the fact that state government's policies affirm the view that this is not a development which should be there.
Councillor Johnson, you had a question?
Look, Mr. Carmody, the arguments you're raising really relate to the proximity of the two centres, and from the information we've got in the report, I can't easily see that. Can you provide us with a map showing the relationship between the two, and so that we can see that?
Between Caversham and this?
Showing the two
sure,
centres, how they're related.
Sure, I can provide that.
Okay,
afterwards.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions to staff. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I don't know if this is Mr. Coaten or Mr. Russell. The MRS 95033 public transit corridor alignment, have the state looked at or considered removing that?
Mr. Russell.
Through Mr. Mayor, almost, well, I'm sure they're considering removing it. The point's been made, it's very obviously redundant in terms of a rail corridor now. Although you'll note from the report that one of the agencies, I think one of the service agencies might have been in the Water Corp to think, well, maybe the corridor could serve some other purpose other than a rail corridor. So I suppose the state will have to consider whether or not it extinguishes that as a regional reserve under the Metropolitan Region scheme, or whether it redesignates it for some other purpose that might be of benefit. So I'm sure they're considering it as we speak, Mr. Mayor.
So
Mr.
supplementary to that, Mr. Mayor, so the change of land use up to Drumpilia, has that all been agreed to now, has it?
Mr. Russell.
Through Mr. Mayor, the report makes it very clear that perhaps the applicants, in all fairness to them, were a bit presumptuous in seeking to designate under a structure plan a zoning of the land that can't in any way, shape or form apply to or override a Metropolitan Region scheme amendment. No doubt that's their desire. That would seem logical, but this instrument won't have any bearing on the fact that the land is legally a regional reserve for a public transport corridor and will stay so until it's amended in the MRS.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carmody. Next speaker on this item is Ms Sally Burkhead from Urbis in support of the recommendation. Ms Urbis did request 10 minutes, so I've granted that request. And take it away.
Thank you very much. I have some plans which I'd like to distribute if that's possible. Could I give those to you? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, elected members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to address you in relation to item 410 of the agenda relating to the Dayton Structure Plan, the District Structure Plan and the Dayton Commercial Centre Structure Plan number 3, known as Dayton Central. My name's Sally Burkhead. I'm a Senior Consultant at Urbis. I'm attending with Darren Levy of Uloth Traffic Consultants and our clients' representatives Stan Horseman and Lydia Perisic. So we're all available to answer questions at the end of this presentation if you have any. Whilst there are a number of structure plans under consideration, this proposal is actually quite simple. It is a straight swap between Arthur Street and Dayton Central. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's been happening at Dayton Central recently. So for the past 6 years, we've been engaged by the proponent to assist in facilitating the development of Dayton Central. This has involved a number of structure plan and development applications and a road closure application. These are aimed at providing a level of service and amenity to a local community which is currently bereft of any other commercial facilities other than those that the proponent has already provided. To date, the centre comprises a service station and Puma convenience store, a Hungry Jack's restaurant, a childcare centre and a soon-to-be-open BWS liquor store. Our client has a contract with Woolworths to develop a full-line supermarket, together with contracts over a number of other retail and showroom tenancies. The supermarket and other uses, including a gym, cafe, medical centre and pharmacy, together with a town square, which form the heart of the centre in a Main Street configuration, will be delivered to the community in the lead up to Christmas trading next year, subject to approvals. Elected members will be considering a responsible authority report in respect to the development application that is currently being considered by officers in this regard in the coming months. The Arthur Street Centre, recently acquired and remediated by our client, has been subject to a number of other supermarket proposals which have lapsed or not been acted upon over many years. Given the ability of Dayton Central to provide a better range of facilities within a short time frame and in a highly suitable and accessible location, a swap in the designation of the centres was considered to be a sensible approach. Whilst a supermarket will not be developed on the Arthur Street site, maintaining an allocation of 1,500 square metres of retail floor space will enable a cafe and or convenience store to be provided to service nearby residents. This will be complementary to the community centre developed opposite the site. The balance of the site will be developed by the proponent for residential and mixed-use purposes in due course. In respect to the dual-lane full-access roundabout proposed to be located on Drumpelia Drive, proposed by officers in lieu of the current approved left-in, left-out, right-in arrangement, our client is agreeable to working with Council to pre-fund its construction. This position is in recognition of the long-term accessibility benefits to the centre and to the broader Dayton community. The proponent is also agreeable to providing the approved access road as a public road rather than as the approved private access way, as supported by council officers and Main Roads WA. Our client is committed to delivering amenities, services and jobs to the Dayton community within the short term. Dayton Central itself will provide 116 full-time equivalent construction jobs, both direct and indirect, over the course of the development, and 325 ongoing jobs. This is a significant benefit for the local community, with the centre providing for skilled and unskilled, full and part-time positions. In the case of the three matters, the subject of this agenda item, we support the officer's recommendations. We therefore request that Council support the applications. And we'd be pleased to respond to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Birkhead. Questions, councillors? Councillor Colley?
Are we getting another presentation from Mr. Horseman?
No.
No.
No, but he's certainly available to answer questions if you have any. Yes.
Sally, just in respect to the overall plan, Road 1, very kind of you that you want to make it a public road, but I'm just wondering whether there's, I'll probably hear from staff shortly, whether there's any cost implications of handing it across to the city. That's one issue. I'm interested in tree plantings versus solar panels over car park areas. I'm also interested in access from, we're probably not looking at the overall plan now, but speed humps and crossings for local residents to walk or ride their gopher to the facility, and making sure the footpaths are all put in place, or the crossings. I noted Cranley Street and Isserton Street, it's a roundabout which is almost impossible for pedestrians to get across. So I'm just interested in those little issues that are not probably part of the big picture at the moment, but we were talking about livable neighbourhoods before and a walkable catchment. These are the things that make up that walkable catchment and make it a usable facility. So have you got any
Certainly. I can respond to the majority of those questions, and then I might pass over to Darren just to respond in terms of the pedestrian crossings across roads. But in terms of the current private access way that's been approved, converting to a public road, that road will be constructed at our client's cost. So that will be fully constructed by our client. So there'll be no cost to any other landowners or to the city in transferring the use or the purpose of that road. In terms of landscape, we have provided a landscape master plan as part of the development application that's been lodged with the council. So that will certainly be considered by your landscape team, and we'll be very happy to have a look at any comments they might have in relation to that. But it's certainly been prepared on the basis of council's current landscape policies. In terms of pedestrian access and pathways, there's a pathway being constructed along Repton Street, and the development plans, which again are before council as part of the development application, provide a fully connected pedestrian accessway network through the centre and also from the surrounding residential area as well. Darren, would you like to comment on crossings at all?
Just briefly. I guess just to add to that, the only other thing is that with the development, the extension of the dual carriageway up Isidon Street will provide a median within there, which will simplify those crossing movements. Obviously, it is difficult right at a roundabout to cross, and it's better to have something that's a bit removed. At the moment, you don't have that central island, but that'll be introduced as part of the ongoing upgrading of the road. Throughout the centre, as Sally mentioned, there's multiple opportunities, and the details of those crossing facilities as to the, whether it's humps within the car parks and raised plateaus and things like that, that'll all be addressed as part of the JDAP assessment at that time.
Through you, Mayor, I still have an issue with the existing convenience store and service station and the fast food buildings, and then the need to get home either via Repton Street or Isidon and exiting onto Drumpelli. I'd personally like to see some traffic calming devices put in there to ensure that it is a slow traffic movement area rather than racing to get home after we've picked up the takeaway. So that's just something.
That's certainly the intention. It's it's intended to be that sort of local environment. I guess it's further detail for down the track as opposed to where we're currently sitting, but that is absolutely the intention. So the specifics of that will be dealt with.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you. Questions, staff. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Coaten, if a proposed roundabout gets built on the Drumpellia, would that impose on the existing public transit corridor?
Mr. Coaten. And Mr. Russell.
Mr. Mayor, through you.
I'll take Mr. Vandlin instead.
The existing transport corridor on the eastern side, are you talking about the yellow reservation on the maps? My understanding is that from a transport authority, they're not going to use that in future. In the JDAP application the previous JDAP application on this site, Main Roads approved that Road 1 to connect to Drumpellia, and there was an agreement from WAPC to grant that access across that land. So from that, you take that they are willing to lease or sell that land. So from that, it's quite clear that they're not intending using it in future.
The reason I asked the question is that the silos, Water Authority and Main Roads, are probably not talking to each other. There's a proposal to put a significant north-south water movement pipeline of some sort, been on the books for a number of years, and it was proposed that it should go along this sort of alignment somewhere rather than through the Swan Valley as an example. So I'm concerned that if that corridor gets used for some other purpose, we might find a pushback on where that pipeline could go.
Mr. Mayor, I think that is the comment that Watercorp made on the application reflects that, and I suppose WIPC will have to consider that when the structure plan is considered by them at the end. But as Phil has said, as the structure plan stands today, and it proposes an alternative use over it, until such time as that actual reservation is cancelled, the reservation overrides all the other land use zones or implications of a structure plan in any case.
Thank you. And the last question, how many more roundabouts are proposed to be put along Drumpelia? Because I thought it's supposed to be a relatively rapid transit route.
Mr Van Lien?
Mr Mayor, through your offhand, I don't know exactly how many, but in terms of the planning that was done at the time when the initial district structure plan and Dayton structure plan was done, that was the Perth to Darwin highway, and the number of access points onto that road was constrained. What has happened in the meantime, it's quite clear that additional access points need to be considered. And the modelling has shown that you certainly need one in this location somewhere, and probably one additional one north of Yildeen somewhere in future, but that is being investigated at the moment.
Thank you, Ms Burkhead. Councillors, now move on to item 411, which is proposed shed in a home business, lot 101, number 54, Forest Road, Henley Brook. And we have one speaker in Mr Barry Scrivener, who is neighbouring property. Thank you, Mr Scrivener. And you've got 5 minutes.
That's it. As you can tell, I don't do this very often. Thank you very much for listening to me. My presentation won't be the best one you've ever heard. It's been made on the run. I've only heard about this development on Monday of this week, and so everything's been pretty hard to do. And today I've been pruning all day in the vineyard. You don't get many opportunities with the weather the way it goes. So the first part of what I want to say is about not only me, but my neighbours also not being notified of this development. My property adjoins or goes across the road from this development. And I thought there was a 200-metre rule that if any development would, we'd be notified of this. When I rang up the planning department, they said it's at their discretion and they don't notify about sheds. But this is more than just a shed. This is a 2-storey shed, which will be about, from my calculations, from what I could work out, about 1,700 cubic metres of shed space. You can stack pallets five high in this shed. It's going to be a large warehouse. And I thought that I would have had the opportunity to prepare something more by being notified earlier. I spoke to my neighbour, who also is opposite this development, Colin Gordon, who only could get through to him today. He works for the Ag Department, and he was horrified at the fact that he hadn't been notified and would have liked to be able to do a presentation, but there was no time for him to do so. So the other thing is, when I spoke to the Ag Department, they said that they had notified the neighbour, only one person, the neighbour next door, and they hadn't had a response. This property has been on the market for a while and changed hands or settled on the 17th of the 5th. I don't know whether they spoke to the previous owner or the new owner about this development and how they actually contacted that person. It's a rental property, well, it was just sent by mail, or they contacted them personally. I would imagine the shed is going to be overlooking a pool on their property, 2 stories down, so I don't know what they've actually done about that with this neighbour's known. And you can't contact, or I couldn't contact the neighbour because it's not publicly known who that's going to be, the new neighbour that is. So that's my first grievance about how everything has gone on with this, and not having an opportunity to do something. I had to scratch notes today between pruning. Now, the other part is about the actual development itself, as much as I could ascertain from what's actually going in. And like I said, it's I think it's about a 300 square metre shed, and it's going to be about 1,700 and 800 cubic metres of shed space. This is clearly not a home business. This is a warehouse. The people that own it they conduct a food business. They import and distribute food. There's already, there will be, I imagine, trucks, forklifts, sea containers, I could imagine, coming up and down to this property. You'll have no control over what actually is going to happen at this property. Now, excuse me for like I say, I've had to scribble notes on things today. Let me see. That's the other thing. I was told that we do not own the view from Black Swan. And we don't. Like Upper Reach, Satellas, Riverbank, no one owns the view. We're merely custodians of the view. This is going to pass on to other people. And to have a two-storey shed, and it's going to, from where our veranda is at the vineyard, it's going to be 1 storey higher than the roof of the house that's been built already on that property. It's going to be large, it's going to take away the ambience of everything, and I think as a custodian of the Swan Valley, I'm a great believer in the Swan Valley as being something for the future, and it's going to be magnificent, and I just don't want to see these sort of things happening. That's about all I can really say and what I've actually been able to put together. So, any questions, anybody?
In quick notice, you didn't do a bad job. Well done. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Coley.
Barry, thanks for that. And will it have an impact on your view?
Oh, big time. I mean, at the moment, the new house that has been built, I can see the roof of that building from the veranda. So this is going to be another storey higher than that. So it'll have a big impact. And just on that, when people come into my restaurant, one of the first things they actually say, because it's not that attractive from the West Swan roadside, but when they come through, they say, "Oh, what a magnificent view! What a lovely ambience!" They actually love it. Now that doesn't say. That's not only saying about our venue; it's saying about the valley in itself. So that to me is important.
Do you think that shed would be consistent in retaining the ambience of the valley?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it should be in Malaga or one of those other places. It's going to be an industrial thing. It's supposed to be a home business. I mean, it's not somebody sitting at home doing MIOB for something or an accountant or whatever else, having a room in his house as a home business. This is a completely different set of things.
And do you think it would have any horticultural or viticulture reason for being there?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is just because they own the property next door. It's convenient. They can have that there and run their business from there. And even today I've seen trucks going, like food trucks going up.
And Barry, if you wanted to set up a big shed on your property and sell cooking ware instead of running the restaurant, do you think that would be an acceptable use of your land?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Thank you. A question to staff, if I could.
Okay, I'll just take Councillor Henderson's question first.
Thank you. Thanks for that. The vista from your restaurant, can you think of any other shed or structure that would be so sort of similarly imposing from that vista?
No. There is a shed built on the southern side. Yeah, that's a normal shed, which would be normal farm type shed, which is all acceptable.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks very, very much for your presentation, Barry. I'm sorry that you didn't get a chance to respond in a timely fashion, and as well as your neighbour. I'm not sure if there'll be time at all for questions to staff, whether your neighbour might have time to put that to them. Just a quick question to staff for you, Mr Mayor.
Yes. I'll ask a question, I'll send it to someone. So.
Okay, so the question is, are there any production limits on this wholesale business preventing them from manufacturing these spices or growing, producing, moving them? Are they already in production somewhere else?
Mr. Russell?
I have to take that on notice. I'm not aware. What I do know is Mr. Pallison has indicated that his home business is for the purpose of providing an employment opportunity, and this is his words, for a son that lives with them that is in some way incapacitated, and this is an employment opportunity, a home business. It's a small-scale facility where they will, and I've used his own application words in the report, where they will repackage and wholesale spices. So that is repackaging. That is not the production of spices. That is spices coming in some package and being repackaged and wholesale. It is, in essence, akin to a small-scale warehouse. But as you can see in the report, it's limited to 50 square metres. But I don't know whether Mr. Pallison is currently doing something else. As he's intimated, what he suggested to me, this is a proposal for the benefit of the son that lives with him. So I would suggest it's probably not occurring at this point in time, but I can check on that for council before next week. But that's my understanding. It is a proposal rather than an existing business currently operating.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Further question?
Can I make a comment on that, please? It's my understanding he is running a wholesale food business in Osborne Park. That's his line of work.
Mr. Russell can follow that up. Councillor Rich, you got a further question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, a question to staff through you. I did have a question. That particular wholesale business, is there anything like that size and scale nearby?
Mr. Russell?
Through Mr. Mayor, I can take that on notice and have a look, but I think the salient point here is this is a home business. It can't be any more than utilising 50 square metres in area. So if Mr. Pallison had some ambition to move his facility in Osborne Park and operate it in its entirety out of this property, he would clearly, very quickly, be in breach of the scheme. And of course we would have to take enforcement action. And I've actually explained to him directly that the plans he's put in, even the plans he's got in at the moment, are bigger than what can be lawfully approved, hence the condition on the approval. He can only use 50 square metres. So whatever he's doing elsewhere, it may well be he takes a component of what he is doing in Osborne Park and places it on the site here at home for the benefit of his son. So it may well be a component of it, and if it's the case, it can only ever be no more than 50 square metres, Mr. Mayor.
Further question?
Just two more questions through you, Mr. Mayor. What is the maximum number of employees, if I've missed it, that can operate from this particular warehouse? And are there follow-up checks within a certain time frame after this is implemented?
Mr. Russell?
Through Mr. Mayor, home business can't employ more than 2 persons, not residents of the property. And in relation to, and so the approval, when we approve a home business, if you don't comply with those conditions, you're in breach. So if it's the case, yes, we can certainly turn up and inspect the property and find out where are your employees. Oh, who lives here, who doesn't live here. No more than 2 that don't live there. If they've got 4, they're in breach. Compliance action. Readily done, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mr. Russell, you described the building as a warehouse. And if I look on the zoning table for Swan Valley Rural, the zoning warehouse is an ex-use. Can you explain why we are not, if that's your interpretation of the building, why it is suggested we proceed with approving it?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think I've been taken out of context. I talked about the nature of storing something for wholesaling. You could say is a warehouse. In this instance here, we're saying it is a home business, okay, as opposed to a warehouse. Both the scale of the shed, I'm not suggesting the shed is of a warehouse scale. I'm very much saying the contrary. It's not of a warehouse scale. So it's a home business. He's applied for a home business. He can comply with a home business. If part of the home business is to store and repackage for the purpose of wholesaling, then we're happy with that. We're not saying it is a warehouse per se, and that's a question when we come to interpret the scheme use class definitions. It's a question of fact and degree, and clearly here he is applying for a home business.
Mayor, through you, I will be giving notification that I'll be moving a refusal on the grounds that it is a warehouse and ex-use within the Swan Valley Rural. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I think there's probably a similar view from Councillor Zanino and myself. Just to make a point, there's a hell of a lot of warehouses in Malaga that are 240 square metres. What's the distance between the house and the corner of the shed approximately? Would it be about 40 or 50 metres walking distance? Would that be about right?
Mr. Russell.
Question is the distance between the house and the corner of the shed. I would say it's about 12 metres.
Oh, 12 metres, okay. Mm-hmm. So can you explain to me why you'd need a shower and a toilet in a shed when you can go to the house to use those facilities?
Through Mr. Mayor, I couldn't possibly. In my time here, I've seen people put all sorts of things, and so has this council, has heard proponents say, this is what I like. I've seen houses with 10 bathrooms in them and 15 rooms for extended families. We've all seen large sheds to accommodate people with massive car collections. We've seen people have outbuildings where they'll have entertainment areas, cabanas, all sorts of things. Only Mr. Pallison could explain his motives there, but it is not uncommon for many sheds in rural areas to have toilets in them and even showers necessarily. So it's not completely out of the ordinary. He'll probably have his own reasons. I'm just not in a position to explain them. It might be if Mr. Pallison was here, he could have answered that question, but I can't, Mr. Mayor. I don't find that extraordinary, though, I would add.
Thank you.
Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just carrying on from where Councillor Henderson was alluding to, if you have a look at the floor plans, if it's a small-scale home business, there's on the bottom floor it says spice packaging room and packaging spice store, and then it's got a huge store shed. And then if you go up to the second floor, it's got a kitchenette, it's got a storeroom, and then it's got office 1 and office 2. I mean, if it's a home-based home business, number one, why would you need such huge storage areas? Number two, why do you need these huge facilities in kitchenette and kitchen facilities, and also another storeroom upstairs and 2 offices? Can someone please explain?
Mr. Russell, you want to try that one as well?
Mr. Mayor, I think I would say very much the same things in my response to Councillor Henderson's questions. I can't explain why Mr. Pallison has done all those things. I would say for mine, I don't necessarily find that extraordinary. I mean, we all got to remember it is possible for the proponent to have 2 persons employed in the business, not members of the house. It may well be, if they're up to all those packaging spice, Mr. Mayor, they may well be dusty or dirty, and those employees, it may well be convenient for them to use a shower or a bathroom facility. I certainly need to think, I imagine, so having a kitchenette may also be done.
Thank you.
That might be those reasons, and without being facetious about this, you know, I suppose none of this strikes me as strange for a home business of this nature. Certainly, it will need to be limited in scope. Otherwise, this Pallison will be in breach, but it's not extraordinary combination of business structure with the storage.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you once again to you, Mr. Russell. In your conversation with the applicant, has he given any indication what the extra 190 square metres of the shed would be used for, and the need for 3 roller doors, each 4 metres in width and 4.2 metres in height? Has he given any indication he's going to store some large vehicles in there or any other property?
Through Mr Mayor, no. What he has indicated, though, is that obviously not the entirety of the 240 square metres of the ground floor of the shed is going to be used or could be used for the home business. But again, as we know, we have that would be extraneous storage for the property. And as we know, many rural properties have rural sheds where people have these large openings for caravans or boats or any number of combination of other machinery that they might have on a rural property of this size that they'll store in their shed. So, again, I can take all these questions, Mr Mayor, in terms of further questions for Mr Pallison, and I reiterate it's perhaps unfortunate that Mr Pallison wasn't here to actually answer these questions himself from Council, but I can take that and provide some response for next week.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
Councillor Richard, you had a hand up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, to you through staff. It was along the similar lines of the size of the roller doors being akin to vineyard equipment and the height of those kind of vehicles, which obviously Mr Russell's going to look at. But if we discuss vehicle and transport movements, whether there are forklifts going to be used and heavy transport machinery there.
Mr Russell.
I'll take note of all these questions, Mr Mayor, and source those answers if I can from Mr Pallison before next week.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Henderson.
As Ward Councillor, I'll be moving a motion against.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr Scrivener. Before you...
Could I just make one more comment about if this shed is built and it's found to be in breach, we're still left with the shed. This is the problem. I mean, he can be in breach and whatever he's dealt with, but we're still left with this big shed, which I view as an eyesore. That's the actual issue. Okay. I can't see any need for having a shed for 500
Thanks, Mr Scrivener. It's not built yet. But before you go, can we have your notes for circulation to councillors and the ones that aren't here? Is that possible?
No.
Have you written them well enough?
No. Over 3 bits of paper between
perhaps if you'd
different
like to...
things. But I will, if you want to, I can put them into...
If you could do an email form for us, that'd be good.
Yes, and I'll send
Thank
it
you,
in.
Mr Scrivener. Appreciate that. Okay, councillors, we now move on to... Councillor, you would have got 2 written deputations on 5.1, which is a Master Road duplication from Mr George Hadji Gabriel from Row Group requesting a deferral, and also for Mr Brian McCubbing from Swan Cave Proprietary Limited, which was distributed. And we now go to Mr Mark Richards from the Bellevue Resident Ratepayers Association in regards to C1.3, which is Robinson Road, Bellevue. Thank you, Mr Richards.
Mr Mayor, councillors and staff, on behalf of the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association, the 72 local businesses and the 2,200 petitioners for keeping Robinson Road open, I thank the council, the city staff for your support on this vital issue. It's been a great effort. We are pleased that the motion concerning Robinson Road has been brought to council and support the motion. I am here tonight with 2 requests: to ask that the council consider amending the motion to support the objectives of Keep Robinson Road Open submission through our Keep Robinson Road Open, and the Mayor's reason for this motion by adding an additional point to convey the following: to ensure full consideration of the traffic implications on the surrounding roads prior to any decision being made, and to address the concerns from constituents and local business owners. The City requests that the Minister for Transport prepares an integrated transport plan that involves an overarching review of the whole area and input provided from all stakeholders being relevant state government authorities, planning, transport, Metronet, MRWA, local government, Swan, Mundaring, Kalamunda, EMRC and local ratepayer and business groups. And 2, in a letter to BRA from the Premier, included BRA as a stakeholder as well as the City of Swan, we ask that the City of Swan also include BRA as a stakeholder concerning the objectives of the BRA Keep Robinson Road Open submission. I've got copies of my deputation as well attached the relevant page Keep Robinson Road open. Submission, page 12, objectives, and the letter from the Premier of Western Australia. Thank you.
Could you email me those suggestions tomorrow?
I've got copies to hand out. I've got a... Yep,
Yeah,
I can do
just
that.
the ones you wanted, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Any questions, Mr Richards, councillors? No, thank you. Okay, councillors, that's all we've got to date. So I'll just run through the items that are on the list for any further questions. 2.1, councillors, is the policy review in regards to sports lighting. 3.1 is the Woolloomooloo Bushfire Local Recovery Plan. 3.2 is the draft desktop heritage assessment for properties nominated in 2020. As in a motion or a question? Or
An alternative?
You may have, okay. 4.1 is the proposed amendment to the local planning scheme to rezone the lots bounded by Roe Highway, the Freight Line, Bellevue Road, James Street, Bellevue. 4.2 is the RAR for the proposed childcare premises in Sam Rosa Place in Dayton.
I've got some questions as staff
On
about that one.
this one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, can I ask away?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. With the childcare centre at Santa Rosa, I noticed that there was some... I'll just get to it. Concern about the legibility of the building being poor, and because basically it's just fairly nondescript and just looks like a sort of ordinary house. And the idea is that you sort of have these facilities so that they look like a childcare centre. So I mean, it was just this came up as an issue, and I just wondered, like, how can that be addressed in the responsible authority report before it goes on further?
To the JDAP. Mr Russell.
Mr Mayor, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what Councillor Catalano is referring to is the design review was undertaken by an engaged design review consultant to look at the building. And if we look on page 178, I think principle 3, the comments from our engaged design consultant indicates that and I'll read it from the report, Mr Mayor, the design response is too small in scale and should be increased to differentiate it from its residential neighbours. This could be achieved through an increase in the floor to ceiling height and a slight increase in the roof pitch. So if that is what the referral response is, I suppose, look, it is possible when council considers it, if what the council wants to do is to actually recommend that there be a modification to the building design in response to the observation of the design review consultant. And as I said, there's two options there. You could ask them to maybe tweak the pitch of the roof so the pitch of the roof isn't the same as the pitch of the roof of the houses surrounding it or in that locality, and or increase the plate height. So, look, I mean, those are really quite simple measures to respond to the findings of the design consultant. If council's of a mind to incorporate that in the recommendation that it will make to the JDAP, it's of course free to do that.
Further question?
Yes, I just wanted what planning staff thought about the acoustics impacting on future residential areas adjacent to this centre.
Mr Russell.
Whether there's going to be any issues there.
Through Mr Mayor, look, as council would know, the considerations of noise generated by these childcare facilities, principally when children are outside playing on surrounding residential properties, is you might say, the key issue. All of these applications come with an acoustic assessment, or at least a modelling exercise that will look at what is the amount of noise to be generated and how can that be mitigated to achieve compliance with the environmental protection noise regulations. So they'll do come up with that, and often a lot of them will say, well, look, the solutions invariably might be to limit the amount of children outside at any one time and to invariably have some form of noise dampening wall, often a masonry wall or in some instances a double thick skin metal colour-bond fence around the boundaries between the play areas and the surrounding residences to achieve mitigation of noise. What we'll note at the moment is that this block of land is a slightly larger parcel of land, and you can see that the house situated amongst it, is the homestead of this original land parcel that the owners of that home have subdivided and sold to the proponents for the childcare facility. So assuredly you would expect that the owners of that residence is not going to cry foul, having sold it to someone for a childcare purpose, if there's a bit of noise, but you never know. In relation to the surrounding subdivision of that area, the owners of the land, the development company who will also be subdividing the balance of the land for residential, I think invariably will be selling lots, if this is approved, with a clear understanding to the purchasers of those lots that they will be living, coexisting next door to or across the road from a childcare centre. So an amenity forewarned is an amenity expected, I suppose. So in those instances, not the same situation as someone that's a residence existing and finding next week a childcare is next door to them. So the people going in will be buying in there, cognisant of the fact that there is a childcare, if it's approved, a childcare facility there that's been approved and might be developed, and you might expect some degree of maybe impact on amenity, although it will be designed to mitigate against the noise levels on those adjoining properties under the noise regulations.
Thank you, Mr Russell.
The same thing goes for the mechanical noise on page 255. I mean, I imagine that the block that's now vacant next to it is going to be quite impacted by, I guess, the noise from the air conditioners and what have you. I mean, is that going to be a problem in the future, do you think?
Mr Russell.
Mr Mayor, no more or less than every single residential property in this great state that relies to survive on air-conditioned houses in summertime. So if there is a problem, it is a problem that is rife in our state and in our city.
Okay. Councillor Kiley, good question.
Thank you, Mayor. To staff, I note the area that public consultation was put out for, but one of the submissions was from across the road. That's understandable. The area that the owners who were advised, do you know how many properties in that lot area, Mr Russell, were advised in that area marked in red?
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just check the report there in terms of public consultation. All surrounding landowners, 28 landowners, so if you look at the aerial, so I would say around all of that, the lots on the other side of Cranley Street, and then on the side of the site there, the lots along Sam Rosa Place.
So is that red zone misleading or not correct?
No, look, true, Mr Mayor, that red on the plan, if you're looking at the page 102, yeah, okay, that is actually the red delineation is obviously the parent lot from which this development site will be subdivided out of. It's the lot, the residential lots around outside of that, the 28 lots that have been sold.
So just going back to that red zone, that's still the one owner?
True, Mr Mayor, that's right there. So the applicant here of the childcare centre is the owner of that entire lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on that one? Thank you, councillors. We move on. Next one is 4.3, which is the proposed construction of a group dwelling at number 3/38 Margaret Street, Midland. None. 4.4, proposed addition to existing restaurant of 43 2J Road, Middle Swan. 4.5, proposed signage, number 43 James Street, Guildford. 4.6, a parking of commercial vehicle at number 37 Jaeger Square, Balladura. 4.7, overwidth driveway at number 12 Grampians Avenue, Janebrook. 4.8, amend aspect of the development approval for DA 174, the increase the height of a shed at lot 71, number 45 Middle Swan Road in West Swan. 4.9, statutory planning decision of delegated authority. 4.10, which is the structure plans for Dayton. 4.11, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Kiley indicated they want to do something with that one. 5.1, which is the Marshall Road duplication. Councillor Henderson.
I'll be moving a motion to refuse.
Okay. Any other questions on that one? No. 5.1, Marshall Road duplication. 5.2 is the Swan Valley Sport Club request for support funding application. 6.1, list of accounts paid. On that one? Yep.
Yes, thank you. Could I have some information about, so page 392, and it's 31063, Department of Fire and Emergency, 1.9 million. Can you just explain what that's about? What's that payments for?
Ms.
Sorry,
Lake?
just curious what to know. That's what I'm asking. Sorry.
At the moment, but I believe it's the ESL collection as part of the rates notice.
Oh, ESL collection, thank you.
State government.
Thank you very much. Now on 393, curious to know what the 9,377 for Minter Ellison was for the Shady Hills. I'd like to know what part Minter Ellison
Mr. Coaten
paid in that for $9,000 worth.
That would have been for legal advice in relation to the agreement for the construction of the second access road.
Okay, so we've had legal advice and we've got an agreement for that already, have we?
We've had legal advice, we haven't got an agreement.
Oh, okay. Okay. So there's legal advice for that one, thank you. And I've got a few more on the accounts, thanks a lot. I just wanted, and so it's page 399, Jackson McDonald, $9,000 for New Junction disposal advice. What was that referring to? What disposal at the New Junction, what was that one?
Mr. Vanderlyn?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I believe that payment was in relation to legal advice on the sale of or the acquisition of Mr. and Mrs. Masaruka's properties. So those are acquisitions that was on the budget for this financial year that needs to be addressed. So it's in relation to contracts that will have to come to council in future.
And that's even though it's called disposal advice. So we didn't dispose, we acquired.
I may have to check in that
Oh,
regard,
great.
and I'll confirm with you.
Would you be able to give that to me in writing, please? Thank you. And also on 400, page 400, there's an amount of 1.273 million to Menchetti Consolidated, and it just says works various projects. Do you think I could have some information about what the 1.273 million is
Take it
for?
on notice. Okay.
Would you be able to provide that for the next meeting, before the next meeting, please?
Okay, yeah, got any more?
No, that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so now for 6.2, councillors, change of basis of valuation. None. We then have the 3 notices of motion. Any questions there? Are there any questions, councillors, on any of the confidential items? Well, I'm getting down to them now, so if there are, then I need to go behind closed doors. So, okay. Go behind closed doors. I don't need a motion. Thanks. Come back live, councillors. No, I don't need a mover. Not here.
You're okay.
All right, John.
Thank you very much indeed.
That's right. I know you haven't
You know,
got your glasses on.
I'm learning very much tonight. Right, C.1, it's a motion by the Mayor, Councillor Bailey, with regard to proposal to introduce a ladies only day. Was this from the community or was it from yourself?
It's from the community.
Okay. Well, I can't put in a motion because it's a personal motion from you. So I'll be just putting a motion in or just giving you notice that I'll be disagreeing with that.
It's your prerogative. Righto. Any other questions, councillors? In that case, we'll call the meeting closed. Thank you all.